cathedral for our relic. Sounds crazy, doesn't it? But in our little village of EMS, you might say that everyone needs a cathedral for a relic. A place to see a pair of lenses that were once worn by Saint Yoder of the Berg. Lenses once made for viewing, but now to bring healing to the brokenhearted. But it isn't easy building a cathedral. And you might ask, why do it then if it isn't easy? I can tell you in 2 words: faith traditions. Traditions, traditions, faith traditions, 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 faith traditions. Because of our faith traditions, we can see the importance of this relic and its longing to be in a place that can rightly house it. You may ask, where did this relic come from? I'll tell you. I don't know. But it's a relic all the same. That is why we need your help. Today, you can help house this relic in a beautiful cathedral by simply listening to these great hits and songs of faith traditions and buying our CD. Who led the early church from the closet, gave the martyrs courage even when they lacked it? Who told the Christians not to sin, gave them the urge for souls to win? Traditions, traditions, faith traditions, 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 faith traditions. So without our faith traditions, our lives would be as shaky as a cathedral without flying buttresses.
Welcome to the Relics on Tour. Thank you for coming out today to view the Saint Yoder of the Berg's lenses and to help us raise money for your cathedral. I'm John Martyr. We have Kirk the Bald, Lori the Phonetic, and Nate the Dull Witted. In the latter part of the 1st century, during the infant years of the church, Spirit-filled Christians met together for worship, eating, encouraging one another, sharing in the Lord's Supper, and remembering the presence of Christ. Their vibrant folkways became attractive to many around them, and soon house churches began popping up all over, as this one-time 80s hit describes.
There's no Sunday school quite yet. Mother always finds a mess. The kids are playing up downstairs. Sister's singing in her prayers. Brother's got a catechism to keep. He can't stick around. Our church house in the middle of our street. Our church house in the middle of our
church, it has a crowd. Someone's getting baptized and they're usually quite proud. Our Eucharist is so slick. Just symbolic flesh and blood enter our lips.
Our church house in the middle of our street. Our church house in the middle of our street. Our church house in the middle of our street. Our church house in
However, life was not always easy for the early church. They were persecuted first by the Jews and then by the Roman authorities, like Nero, who used them for human torches. Martyrs were common as Christians died for their faith. One in particular was Justin, an apologist, a defender of Christianity who taught the true philosophy. He linked Christianity to classical wisdom, as you should have noted on your exam. It was this line of thinking that eventually helped Christianity to be accepted by the intelligentsia. Unfortunately for Justin, that time had not come and he was killed. However, this was not a sad time for Justin and other martyrs, for this was their ultimate form of worship. But we can't help but thinking they were a little nervous as they stood in the arenas, as this Broadway hit reveals.
When whistle a happy tune, and Nero won't suspect I'm afraid.
While being mauled by lions, I keep my martyrdom in mind and whistle a happy tune, and Nero never knows I'm afraid.
The result of this deception is very hard to tell, for when I'm dead, the emperor I fooled will never be able to tell. Whenever I'm in the arena, I hold my head erect and whistle a happy tune, and Nero won't suspect I'm afraid. The early Christians were being persecuted, and Rome's power and anger were against the church. But through arrests, torture, and burnings, people still flocked to this church. Their welcome into communion from baptism was a great celebration. This song commemorates the baptism of a young Roman convert named Oliver.
Consider yourself at home. Consider yourself one of the family. You've proven your faith is strong. It's clear we're going to get along. Consider yourself well in. We've made you a place here in the catacomb. We haven't a lot to spare. Who cares? Whatever we got, we share. We saw you this Easter morning, naked on the riverbank, shivering from the cold or fright. We dunked you in the name of Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, and now you're dressed in robes of white. So now that you've been baptized, you finally can take part in the Eucharist. The memory of our Lord grants peace and strength and keeps us in one accord. Consider yourself our mate. We think that it's worth a big fuss, 'cause after 3 years of catechism we can state, consider yourself one of us.
The thoroughness of the catechism required for baptism was partly due to two dualistic heresies, Gnosticism and
Marcionism.
Yeah, okay. In response to these dangerous teachings, the church developed an official Christian canon, a uniform creed, and the notion of
Apostolic.
Succession to establish the authority of the church. Also, some of its teachers wrote fairly complete explanations of Christian truth to answer the heretics. Origen was one of these teachers, and toward the end of his life, while in prison and tortured under Decius, he wrote this song, which became a rallying cry for Christians during that persecution and has been adapted to other persecutions since.
We don't need no certificate of sacrifice.
Thank you.
We don't need no pagan rites. The days of torture in the prisons. We're confessors, we will not lapse. Hey, Decius, leave those Christians alone. All in all, you're just another brick in the wall. All in all, you're just another brick in the wall.
How can you worship the emperor if you don't have a certificate? How can you have a certificate if you don't worship the emperor?
The question of whether to readmit to communion those who had weakened under persecution was a divisive issue. It was revisited half a century later when a similar but more intense and sustained persecution broke out under Diocletian and Galerius. This was called the Great Persecution, and it finally ended when Constantine emerged as emperor. He was disposed to tolerate Christianity, having received a vision on the eve of a decisive victory, and officially recognized Christianity as a legitimate, even a favored religion. For most believers, this change in fortune was worth celebrating, like in this popular song from the dance halls of early Christendom.
Start spreading the news.
Sing it, Lord.
The kingdom is here. I wanna be a part of it. The Constantinian shift.
All right. These vagabond shoes
You go, Nate.
I'm throwing away.
You throw away, babe.
Because I'm in the heart of it, the Constantinian shift.
I want to wake up in the kingdom that's now complete. Persecution's out of our lives. Christians are now the cream of the crop at the top of the heap. My house church days are melting away. We now have grand basilicas in this Christian age. When we have wealth and pomp, it means God's on the top. It's up to you, Constantinian shift.
With the Constantinian shift, the church had power for the first time and wealth was prevalent. At the same time, a movement was starting in the desert, which progressed through the 15th century. Thanks. But yeah, that began to grow in part as a reaction to Christendom. But some were being pulled away from their peace and solitude in the desert and into ordination against their will. Remember with me the TV show about primates back in the 60s. The monks are here to perform their theme song.
Here we come, Anthony and Paul. We're looking for solitude. We don't need nothing at all. Hey, hey, we're the monks. And people say we're kind of withdrawn, but we're too busy praying to put anybody down. Benedict had the rule, but it was soon ignored. The monks of Cluny got inspired, and the rule was restored. Hey, hey, we're the monks. And people say we're kind of withdrawn, but we're too busy praying to put anybody down. We're moving out to the desert, leaving our society, following the words of Jesus, taking about poverty. Hey, hey, we're the monkeys. Hey, hey, we're the monkeys. Hey, hey, we're the monks.
One of the concerns of the church fathers was the defense and development of the teachings of the church. Divisive heresies periodically sprang up, sparking controversies that raged for decades. From the 4th century through the 8th century, 7th
Ecumenical.
councils were called by emperors hoping to lay the current debates to rest. At each of these, bishops from all over the empire gathered to clarify orthodoxy and condemn a heretic. The struggles of the bishops at Nicaea in 325 with Christ's divine identity, and then at Chalcedon in 451 with his human identity, were captured centuries later by the famed troubadour Joan Osborne of Arc, which Kirk the Bald will now play this rendition.
God had a nature, what would it be, and would you say it was just one, or two, or three, or for the sake of his glory? Do we need to say that he is just one person? And yeah, homoousios, yeah, homoousios, and was the true God one of us? Can we trust Athanasius? Let's anathematize Arius so we all can go home. We just want to go home. When God had a face, could he really feel words? When God had a face, could he really feel? Was his humanity consumed like molten steel? Were there two separate and distinct hypostases, or was it more communicatio idiomatum? And Christ is God. Christ is man. Was God truly one of us? Can we stop fighting and just discuss? Is this issue worth the fuss? We just want to go home. Can't we all just get along? We don't need another tone. Just read the Pope's letter from Rome.
Councils sought to define the church faith. They were unsuccessful in keeping the church unified. Theological debates threatened to split the church at every turn. Should purity or forgiving love be the defining faith characteristic of the church? How was Jesus both divine and human? How should we use images in the church? Many of these deep thoughts and debates led to schisms in the church, and eventually between the East and West. But first, let's break and hear a word from our sponsor.
You say Theotokos, and I say Christotokos.
You say homoousios, I say homoousios. Theotokos,
Christokos, homoousios.
homoousios. Let's call the whole thing off.
Are you tired of a unified church?
I think I am.
Have you ever wanted to split a church but you just didn't know how?
Just the other day, I was
Well,
saying.
have I got a product for you? It's the all-new Schismatic 2001 by Ronco.
That's great, John Martyr, but how does this machine work?
Well, it's simple, Nate the dog. First, you take the church, or say an issue of the church, Theotokos and Christokos, the Tokos. Set the schismatic to split for either theological, economic, or for political reasons, and then stand back, Nate, because splitting the church gets kind of messy.
Okay.
And you just watch that baby work.
Whoa, that is so simple.
Isn't that simple?
That's fantastic. But wait, John, can I try it?
Sure, Nate.
Okay.
Just that easy.
All right,
Even
so
the dull
let's
lady can do it.
I take the church. Let's take a bigger issue like iconoclast.
Iconoclast, that's
Okay, iconoclast, kind of duels, the setting. Okay, and then I just let it go, right?
You just let it rip.
All right, schismatic. Oh, all right. That is incredible. That is incredible. Look at that. Look at that, folks.
It is just that.
Look at that clean cut.
And you too can have the schismatic. Your very own schismatic.
But wait, John, how much does a machine like this cost?
I'm glad you asked, Nate.
So am I.
For a limited time, you can have the 2001 schismatic from Ronco for the commemorative price of $10.54. Yes, $10.54, celebrating the year of the East and West churches split.
$10.54, what a great deal.
That is a great deal. And if you act now, you'll also receive this autographed picture of Meadow Simon.
Wait, who's he?
Well, we'll learn about him next semester.
Okay.
I want you all to act now, in order. But first, Nate, do you want to show the crowd what this baby can
Let's
really do?
crank it up a notch.
Let's crank it up a notch.
Let's do the old East-West, shall we? All right, so we got East and West here. I'm just going to set it for dice. You might want to step back.
It's just that simple. Over now.
Operators are standing by.
Sorry.
You say iconoclast, I say iconodual.
You say celibate, and I say it's irrelevant. Iconoclast,
Iconodual, celibate.
it's irrelevant.
Let's call the whole thing off.
Iconoclasts, iconoduals, it was enough to split a church. Constantine V, he forbade the use of icons, calling them idols and worship, while John of Damascus condoned their use. His argument was that God himself became fully human, therefore representing him in art may offer a brief commentary on his life. In fact, the East moved quickly to establish veneration or dulia for images, while reserving latria worship for God. Let's listen to the East describe their icons in this popular song.
Boom, 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 boom. Boom, 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 boom,
If it's cold outside, I go inside to pray. I guess you'd say, what can make me feel this way?
Icons.
Talking about icons, icons. The faces on the wall keeps my heart warm. Make sure you say, Mary before the saints, but Christ leads the way. Talking about
Icons.
talking about icons, icons.
The fall of Rome in 476 left the West without an emperor. However, the papacy and monasticism helped to maintain order and justice in the uncertain world. After 324 years, in an unprecedented move, a new emperor was put into place and crowned by the Pope. Pope Leo III took the crown and placed it on the head of a man named Charlemagne.
Shall we dance on this bright Christmas morning? Shall we fly? Shall we dance? And shall then guard the state and church as well? Or perchance, when the last little Saxon's been baptized, shall we then be together with this crown in my hands? And shall you be my new emperor? On this clear understanding that this kind of thing can happen, shall we dance? Charlemagne, shall we dance?
The alliance between the papacy and the new Holy Roman Empire heralded a new phase in the relationship between church and state. The authority of the Pope was now recognized in political matters as well as spiritual. Throughout the medieval period, the papacy was a source of unity for the West, but a source of turmoil as well. Temporal power and wealth corrupted many popes and the clerical system in general, and while several popes, especially Innocent III, exerted great political influence or sought to reform the church, the trend was toward abuses and intrigues. This explains the high rate of papal turnovers.
What, apple turnovers?
Papal turnovers, niet bedacht.
There was Innocent, Celestian, Leo, Felix III, Symmachus, Hormodus, John Villagris, Pelagros. Let's stop, hang on a second. Let's back up a second. Can we start again? Are we okay on sound? Okay. Let's hear about the popes again, John. There was Innocent, Celestian, Leo, Felix III, Symmachus, Hormodus, John Villagris, Pelagris, Gregory, and Honoris, Segrus, Gregory II, Gregory III, Zacharias, and Stephen II, Adrian, Leo III, and Nicholas I, and Leo IX. Oh, yeah. There was Victor II, and Stephen IX, and Nicholas II, and Alexander II, and Gregory VII, and Urban VI, and Pascal II, and Cassus II, Alexander III, and Innocent III, and Gregory IX, and Celestine V, William V, and Benedict IX, and Clement V, and John XXII, who was Bonnie XII, and Nicholas VI, and Innocent II, and Urban V, Gregory XI, and Urban VI, and Clement VII, and Bonnie IX, Benedict XIII, and Innocent XVII, and Gregory XII, and Alexander V, John XXIII, and Martin V, and Eugene IV, and Nicholas V. There were 6, he was really a 4 then. Alexander, he was really a 6, and Julius was a 2nd, and the last one was Leo X. I beat you. No.
For about 200 years, beginning in 1095, the Crusades provided an outlet for a lot of religious fervor. The original appeal was to protect Christ's honor by expelling the Muslims from the Holy Lands. The First Crusade was successful in establishing a Christian kingdom in Jerusalem that lasted almost 90 years, but later efforts were mostly fiascos, accomplishing only the slaughter of a lot of Muslims and Jews and even Byzantine Christians. However, not all Christians in Europe were possessed by the crusading spirit. While Peter the Hermit was rousing a rabble against the infidel, his brother, Kermit the Hermit, stayed home.
Christians and me. Who said that crusades could reconquer the Holy Land? Peter the Hermit sure tried. Some got discouraged, but they found a Holy Lance, the one that had pierced Christ's side. Crusade after crusade, 6, 7, 8. How many will there be? Someday we'll find it, the human connection of Muslims, the Christians, and me.
As crusades dwindled, the learned began to rise, and an elite group of scholars rose with them. The rule of scholasticism was at hand, and at the head of the movement was a man named Thomas Aquinas. The masses rebelled against his and others' escape into words, theology, and God's divine powers. The scholastic movement sought to define God's principles and very being. This was too much for devout Christians, and the Renaissance, a return to classical learning, was birthed. But before we go that far, put on your tie-dye and take a trip with us as we hear this great classic about Thomas Aquinas.
When Anselm has proven God by ontology, and philosophy's discouraged by Bernard, when Lombard has systemized theology, and authorities critiqued by Abelard, this is the dawning of the age of Aquinas, age of Aquinas. Theology Aristotelian epitomized scholasticism, spark reactive mysticism, influenced Scotus and Occam, still the basis of church doctrine. Aquinas.
So the church continued to be strengthened, and at the same time,
I'm not going to help you on this one.
Imperialism
There you go.
became the accepted reality. By the 15th century, the spirit of mission was merged with the desire for wealth and land, and thus began the Christian conquest of the New World. So this leaves us at a place in history where the line between the church and the state pretty much disappeared. We are left with this question: what are the burning issues at stake?
Burning issues.
What's this?
I thought we could have some refreshments and maybe partake of communion, but that's not a good idea.
Do you know who they are? These are like the groupies that come to follow us. They're the
that's right.
common people.
Common people.
This is the blood and
might
the
spill
body
it.
of Christ.
The crumbs on the
And
floor.
what if the rats pick it up?
I could eat it for them.
What would you? What if?
Would the rats eat the body of Jesus?
Well, yeah. Well, then what do you do?
Okay,
Then the
well,
rat is
history's
sanctified.
fun. We'll
And
leave
what
them to
does-
that. We're glad you could join us today. Make sure to pick up one of our CDs on your way out.
Put it on.
And a schismatic if you
All
want.
right.
There's representatives standing back at the back.
All right.
For real. You're forgiven.
Something weird is happening around the whole wide world. People are making history, every boy and girl. Oh, it's no big mystery, it's time to celebrate history. Every boy and girl ski, it's time to celebrate history. My grandma's name was Skapansky, she's part of my family history. Even way back in old BCE, they were making lots of history. Lots of religious leaders making lots of fuss. Augustine was a little crazy, but Ambrose was just plain nuts. Oh, it's no big mystery, it's time to celebrate history. Every boy and girl ski, it's time to celebrate history. So wait a second and you'll see, we'll sit here and make some history. So slap your hand on your knee and let's celebrate some history. Jerome, Basil, and Martin, they took a monastic vow. And when Constantine hit the stage, he just took a great big bow. Oh, it's no big mystery, it's time to celebrate history. Every boy and girl ski, it's time to celebrate history. The Romans like to ski on the slopes of the Alps skis. Philosophers thought they'd set the world free, but they just messed up history. So gather all of your friends' skis. All the people at the seminary will follow Francis of Assisi. Go celebrate some history. The Pope, he's sitting there on his big white throne. And when someone calls and asks for him, you can say he's indisposed. Oh, it's no history. It's time to celebrate history. Every boy and girl ski. It's time to celebrate history. So take faith traditions and you'll see lots of Yoders and one Steve. People who know their history, even if it's through different lens skis. Oh, it's no big mystery. It's time to celebrate history.
Everyone!
Everyone stand up.
Girl ski. It's time to celebrate history. No big mystery. It's time to celebrate history. Every boy and girl ski. It's time to celebrate.
Time to celebrate.
Celebrate history. We'll give you an encore.
An outtake.
John's got an outtake encore he'll do for us.
All right, this song didn't make it into the final cut. In fact, there were probably about 20 or 30 songs that didn't make it into the final cut. Y'all got another one too? Damn it. All right. Ambrose, he was the man back in his day, and he preached well. And he stood up against the emperors. And this is the Ambrose rap. Anyway. Here I am, once again, as your speaker, strong, not weaker. From Milan, I said, not Eureka. Born again, a spirit-filled Christian, full of ambition, so why don't you listen? I do not drink, I do not smoke. I don't have sex, and that's no joke, but I talk that talk and walk that walk and share Christ to everybody on my block. I don't compromise, become correct, and I preach the kind of sermons that you won't forget, because I'm the AMB, the RSC, on the MIKE for GOD, and that's the way to BE with history. So do you get the pie, eyes, and T, homie? I could preach about Jesus all night, and I'm punking emperors left and right. But like Apostle Paul, I fought a good fight, but it's not my power or my might, but it's the Spirit of the Lord that makes things right. So do you get it? Do you comprehend, my friend? But if you don't, one time, won't you push rewind, listen closer to the lyrics, and you will find there is no confusion in this communication, but this congregation can tell the whole nation the truth, the word, the only way for survival, which can be looked up and found in the Bible. So get it, got it, good. Now tell your neighborhood.